welcome to Trekosophy, the Star Trek philosophy podcast. After our long winter hiatus, we here at Trekosophy are determined to bring you new episodes no matter what. So even though we all died horribly, we're still recording an episode today. Join us now as we visit the Barge of the Dead, where our Trekosophy team has all met their ignoble ends and now find their way where Klingons go when they die dishonorably, down to Grethor. First, we have our fearless leader, who slipped in the sonic shower. It's Ben McLean.
Cleanliness is next to Klingonliness.
Next, we have our technical guru, who died while using the warp core to make microwave popcorn. It's Chris McGee.
Hey, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
And our critically acclaimed author, who met his ill-fated end being mauled to death by tribbles, Brendan Kirby.
I took at least one with me.
And I am Bill Allen, a.k.a. the guy in the red shirt. And you don't want to know how I went out. And this is Trekosophy.
So,
Barge of the Dead, why don't we get a synopsis up in this bit? Or a synopsis up in this place to make you curse word unhappy folks happy.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so
long
who wants to
story
give a
short,
synopsis? Yeah, Bill has it. Bill has the radio voice. Let's go.
Okay.
Go.
Long story short, Torres is off on an away mission. Her shuttle takes damage, and they get her back in sickbay, and her heart stops. And while she's dead, she basically has a near-death experience where she sees herself on the Barge of the Dead, which is the Klingons' similar to Charon's little ferry boat, which takes people to the dishonorable half of the Klingon afterlife. And after that near-death experience, awakening to the Klingon side of her culture, she tries to go back so she can save the spirit of her dead mother. That's a overly simplified gist, but...
Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty accurate.
yeah, and then various bizarre events occur, which strongly suggest that she is dealing with a whole bunch of things in her subconscious, within her own mind, that have been building up over the course of Voyager.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, the big question that I had throughout this entire episode is, was this really real, or was it just all in her mind?
And I think that's a really good narrative as to when the lot of us, regardless of where we are in our... I'll just put it out there, our spiritual lives. To what extent are our conceptions of the afterlife symbolic? To what extent are they anthropomorphic? To what extent are they theological or philosophical? Or grounded in reality? I think that's I thought the episode was brilliant. I thought it raised a lot of interesting questions. And also... I mean, the concept of B'Elanna actually going to Grethor to rescue her mother, I thought brought up a lot of wonderful questions about the theology and philosophy and ethics of self-sacrifice. And also the justice of Grethor itself. Because I think all of us, whoever was watching it, had to think, well, there's something unjust about that. Even B'Elanna thought, well, there's something unjust. I screwed up, my mother has to pay the price. And yet, it's a pretty central mythology, or a pretty central story to a lot of religious belief. And yet, there seems to be something that cries out that this is not just.
Well, you have to remember, though, with Klingons, all of their honor or dishonor spans not just your own life, but all your descendants' lives, too. If you're dishonored, your son and your grandson will bear the shame as well.
I know, and that wasn't isolated in Voyager. It was continuing on with the Klingon tradition from Next Generation. That wasn't lost on me, but what also wasn't lost on me was the concept of original sin. This is not pittance in Christian theology. It's not pittance in a whole slew of theology. I mean, the notion of karma, for example. There's a lot of religious theology that's predicated on the fact of what someone else has done will affect us in some sort of a grand scheme of things, a grandiose view of justice. If someone else sinned, I pay the price. Sure, there's Klingon mythology, and they were true to the story. I get what you're saying, Chris. They were being true to Klingon religion, but they were also being true to a lot of other religions. And it raises a real question of justice that I don't think a lot of us are comfortable answering.
Well, there's a lot of different things you just brought up, and it's hard to just pick one.
Well, go for it. Pick one. Pick one.
Well,
just one, Ben.
I think that there are some religions, some religious beliefs, some beliefs about the afterlife that really are flatly unjust.
Such as?
Well, I think Calvinism is flatly unjust. You're either chosen ahead of time to be saved or to be damned. Because if people are chosen ahead of time to be saved, then it's a zero-sum game. Every person who is, not chosen to be saved is therefore chosen to be damned. That's logic.
But
And
okay. Time out. Calvinism, is that what you just described there?
yeah, Calvinism. It's the whole
Where
thing about
everyone's already chosen to be.
predestination.
Basically,
Okay.
you have no free will. Whatever you do is what you're predestined to do.
Okay.
If you choose to, love God and pray to Jesus, it's because He predestined you to do that. God forced the issue upon you.
Well,
The notion
most
is
Calvinists
all of
would
us-
object to that description, but that is the bottom line.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't. I've read Calvin. I've read the Institutes, cover to cover.
Yeah, I meant most Calvinists today would object to that description. Most of them are compatibilists of some variety. Most of them try to make it sound like you still have free will in various ways. But
Minimally.
that's still the bottom line. I mean, what you just said is the bottom line, but it's not what they would say. I'm just in all fairness.
I think that to boil it down to a Star Trek universe, you have B'Elanna Mariah. What was her name? What was B'Elanna's mother's name? Mariah?
Miral.
Miral? Yeah, Miral. I think it was Miral. Her mother, she had no choice in the matter of whether or not B'Elanna would accept Klingon mythology and actually live an honorable life. B'Elanna chose to live a dishonorable life, and so she gets condemned. Sure, she had some sort of a minor influence there. She could teach her, she could tell her the ways of Kalis, this, that, and the other thing. But in the end, it's B'Elanna's choice. And her mother has to suffer the consequence for that. There seems to me something that's unjust about that. And yet, original sin. There seems to be something unjust about it.
Yeah,
I'd argue that it's not necessarily unjust because, like Chris already mentioned, family is a crucial part of Klingon culture in all ways. And when Torres rejected her Klingon heritage, she was rejecting half of her family. She was breaking apart that central part of what everybody needs, because everybody needs a family. And it was, I mean, I'd hesitate to say that her mom was a bad mom, but I mean, if she'd have done better, Torres might have, if not accepted all of Klingon, not turned her back on it as completely as she did. So it was Torres's mom dropping the ball, Torres's mom's personal failure that got her there. But knowing how these Klingons are with their crazy tests and the fact that the mom was on the barge and not actually in the lands of Greythor, it was probably just all this big, elaborate test to make Torres, to see if she really would choose honorably or not. Moral was really in no danger, etc., etc., etc. Because gods tend to do crazy things like that.
Could have been. It could have been. But there's also something else in me. And at the root of all of this questioning lies something in Christian theology, because that's my context, whereby we're not judged based on our relationship with God, but based on whether or not we were good teachers. Did you actually raise your kids? Oh, you didn't. You aren't. What's the I can't remember the term, but in control of your affairs, household and order. You weren't very good at raising your kids, and so now you no longer have as authoritative a position in a church. Or you've done something heinous because you actually haven't raised those around you to think of Christ highly. Well, maybe you just love God and you have a great relationship with Him and live a holy life, and people around you don't clue into it. Maybe you're just not a very good teacher. No longer are we judged based on our moral character or based on our relationship with God, but now we're based on our ability to teach. And that's one of the things the episode raised, which really is at the heart. I don't want to say at the heart of Christian theology, but it's certainly part of it. You're not judged strictly based on your own holiness, but it's based on the holiness that you affect in others, especially your children. And there seems to me to be something unjust about that. And not only is there something unjust about that, not only do I have to suffer based on my own moral decisions or lack of moral decisions, but I might have to suffer for my parents' decisions. Maybe I have never been given a godly upbringing, and now I live an ungodly life, but I never had control of that, and now I've got to suffer the consequences.
I have a few things to put in here that I think would contribute to the discussion. Well, the first is, I might say that I'm a Latter-day Saint, and some of this touches on my some of my reasons specifically for being a Latter-day Saint. One is that at the very center of our theology is this idea of individual moral agency, and that no one can be responsible for the sins of their parents. The physical consequences from the sins of their parents will certainly impact them, but they won't have a moral, blame or for the sins of their parents. And the thing that really makes it a big difference to me in the Book of Mormon is Alma's discourse on justice, which goes into a lot of this, and it basically lays out a system in which there is absolutely no one ever who is ever put into a situation like you're describing. And I think that this is a flaw in the mainstream view that the view I've adopted seems to correct for. But I don't know whether getting deeper into that would help very much, but I'm just saying there are, and I'm not saying this is the only solution to that problem either, but there are theological solutions to some of that. But here's another really cool thing from another Latter-day Saint that isn't theological that I think is very relevant to Barge of the Dead. It's from Orson Scott Card in his story collection First Meetings, in which a whole bunch of different characters from the Ender's Game universe meet for the first time. he has Ender's father, John Paul Wiggin, meet Teresa, who will become Teresa Wiggin, his wife, meets her for the first time. She's teaching some kind of anthropology class. And apparently her father is a big Mormon, and his family was Catholic. And so Ender's actually always has had mixed Mormon Catholic influence, and that actually comes out in the novels in tiny, tiny ways. But it shows where it all comes from in this story. And one of the things is that John Paul Wiggin says about fighting the population laws, because there's laws against overpopulation. Against having too many, or having more than the requisite numbers of children. And John Paul says, you'll get in trouble if you make a big deal about it, like your father, like your whole church. And Teresa says, not my church. And John Paul says, right, of course. You're the only person in history who is completely immune to her religious upbringing. She wanted to argue with him. This is the prose in the novel. She wanted to argue with him, but she knew the science his assertion was based on that showed the impossibility of escaping from the core worldview instilled in children by their parents. Even though she had long since repudiated it, it was still inside her, so that there was a constant argument, her parents' voices sniping at her, her own inner voice arguing with them. So what this is saying, I'm not saying this is necessarily true, but what this suggests is not that people are bound to agree with their parents' views, because they certainly aren't, but that people will always have that worldview kind of inside them in a way that it will always be providing some input into their decisions, whether that input is interpreted positively or negatively by the person.
Sure.
So if you reject religion, it's always the specific religion you were raised in that you're really rejecting, for example. Or if you reject atheism, it's always the specific atheism that you were raised in that you're rejecting. That's what it's saying. And I think that Barge of the Dead really lays that out. Don't you think? I mean, that seems to be really, in some ways, a big part of what Barge of the Dead is really all about.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
I don't know about you guys, but I'll give you a quick synopsis of my youth, religion-wise, and that is, I was brought up as a Christian, specifically a Presbyterian, and I think I could be mistaken in this, but I think it's fairly common, almost universal, that children like to rebel against what they were brought up with. Children love to rebel against their parents, especially when they hit their teenage years. And I, like many others my age, as a teenager, did not want to go to church anymore. I was tired of it. I thought it was a waste of 2 hours on a Sunday, the day that I wanted to have off, away from school, etc. I think it's natural for a person to want to rebel when they're a child like that. They want to do their own thing. They want to make their own choices and not be stuck with the choices that their parents have saddled them with. And maybe this is sort of an extension of that. Torres rebelled against her parents, says, well, I know you all have these religious beliefs, but I'm only 1/4 Klingon. I think she was 1/4, not 1/2, right? I can't remember.
It was 1/2.
1/2. Okay, I'm only 1/2 Klingon. I can choose my own damn path, whether or not that's Klingon religion,
whether or not it's damned or not. One.
Exactly, and so that's probably just the way she kind of rebelled, and maybe she stuck with it. I mean, later on in my life, personally, I came back to Christianity. That was my choice. In her life, maybe she just chose not to go back to the Klingon religion.
Yes, I think it's illuminating something existentialist, whereby we have to carve out for ourselves our own path, because there is something that the episode brought up that I thought was brilliant. It's very possible to be asphyxiated by something. If somebody is so overly legalistic about a concept, it becomes detrimental. When you say, look, this is the way you're going to live your life, this is X, Y, and Z, you've got to follow this principle, you've got to follow that principle, you've got to follow this principle, it essentially becomes so bogged down where the core of what it is that you're trying to follow is lost.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to live an honorable life. I want to fight for justice. I want to lead this. I'm not a timid person. I'm a courageous person. Oh, but now here come all the rules. You have to eat the heart of your enemy. You have to, say 5 Hail Kaluses before you go to bed. And that, it ceases to become anything meaningful. Kalus just wanted you to, if there's some sort of evil going on, you kick ass. That's all he wanted. And it's the same thing with Christianity, where, Christ wants you to be living a life of faith, hope, and charity. And now all of a sudden, faith, hope, and charity becomes sing these awful hymns, go to a church with some people you really don't like, and they're not very sociable.
To compare clothing.
Yeah, to compare clothing. Only so that you can avoid saying words X, Y, and Z and say words A, B, and C. Now all of that is lost. The life of faith, hope, and charity is lost in favor of following all these rules. So, B'Elanna, who could have been infatuated with the teachings of Kalus because she was so ill-tempered, Kalus may have appealed to her. Now, along comes her overbearing mother, and this was huge in the episode. Her mother was so overbearing, so pushy, so this is the way it's got to be, so dogmatic, so unrelenting, so unmerciful, that it became distasteful. And she rejected it, even though there was a core of truth. And along comes the episode, and B'Elanna actually has to start being self-sacrificial and do something Klingon. Face some sort of a danger for the sake of her mother, this higher good. She has to do something so courageous. Which is overcoming the legalism of her upbringing. I thought this was wonderful. I thought it was an absolutely wonderful episode. That's me.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The thing I found that was so interesting about this one is it sort of reminded me of a very early episode, season 1, season 2, where Kes gets zapped in this alien holy temple.
Yes, I had the same thoughts. Yes.
Janeway has to go on this mystical journey to commune with the gods and find a way to cure her. And they were making a point there that Janeway was all about the science, all about the exploration, all about seeing what's out there. But there was this whole bunch of stuff that she would refuse to explore at all because she didn't even think about it. And at the end of the episode, you see that she's kind of realized that there's more to life than just the straightforward known. There's this whole unknown side of things that is worth looking into. Because you can see she was actually disappointed when the doctor was able to give a rational explanation for the mysticism that went down.
It wasn't the clown one, was it?
No, it wasn't clown one. But, Bill, there was something I thought that was in addition to that really played in well to this episode. Because you had the overbearing mother, which asphyxiated B'Elanna to the point of rejecting Klingon religion, and then Janeway, who was so caught up with the rules and the regulations of that episode, where she had to go through all of these rituals just to meet the gods. She had met these 3 crazy, questionable senior citizens at the start of the episode. Said, oh yeah, well, forget you guys. I have to go on a quest here. And then went on this quest to go find the gods. And at the end of all her quests, at the end of all her workings, what did she find? She finally met the gods. It was the 3 senior citizens she had met at the start of the episode. Said, everything you did was meaningless. You had us in the beginning. You didn't have to go through all of these rituals, all this nonsense. We were there in the beginning. And that was the point of this episode, I thought. It was B'Elanna. Okay, here's what you have to do in order to be an honorable Klingon. No. It's got nothing to do with all the rituals. Were you willing to make this self-sacrifice? Oh, you actually are willing to sacrifice of yourself to save your mother. It's got nothing to do with the ritual and did you eat the heart of your enemy. It's got everything to do with, the context. And once B'Elanna was... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and the important thing to remember about Torres is that, when it comes to Klingon stuff, the most important aspect of what makes something honorable is the courage of it. And Torres ran away from her Klingonness, then she ran away from the Academy, and then she was running away from Janeway's rules. She was always running away, and she never took a stand until she has this mystical experience, and that was where... It was the courage that made the honor mean something, and not the, like you were saying, it's not the ritual that makes the honor mean something. It's the courage.
That's exactly it. It's the state of her heart.
I loved the part where Voyager was hell.
Well, you all recall Milton Paradise Lost, no doubt. You can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven.
Wow, that's totally what it... You're right.
That's deep.
First it's Dante, and then it's Milton. This episode.
It really is. And I honestly believe Dante and Milton were superior to Homer and Virgil, but that's just Kirby. You really...
Well, Dante was pretty cool, although he was more of a political satirist than a theological thinker.
No. He was both.
He was totally both. Sorry,
Bill. Bill, go to hell. Go to Graythor.
Which circle?
Fifth ring. Drop down fifth ring. Bill, fifth ring.
I don't believe in Dante's Catholic hell, but there is complex philosophical thinking in the work, and I would still think that if I was an atheist.
You see, I wouldn't. If I were an atheist, I would reject a lot of it. But I am so many stages away from atheism.
Well, see, that's another interesting aspect of this aspect is, we've all been talking like this spiritual world is, there really is a Klingon afterlife, and Torres actually had to do all this stuff, but even from the perspective of someone who doesn't believe in an afterlife, this is an interesting episode that gives you a unique look at self-discovery. It's really about Torres.
Yes.
She's been feeling out of place her whole life.
I think you're right, Bill. That's kind of what this episode is.
Well, I've got a question.
It's
fire away.
It's the question, okay, well, suppose you are an atheist, and yes, there's an awful lot there. I've been pouring through the book of Revelation lately, as of late, and there's wonderful ideas in there, even if you're an atheist. Beautiful imagery, intoxicating, elegant imagery. But what if you're an atheist? Or, for example, what if you're a Christian watching this episode? How do you distinguish between symbols and reality? Because if you're an atheist, you can say symbol this, symbol that, symbol X, Y, and Z, and you can be Chakotay, and you can say, okay, your subconscious is trying to tell you something. And that was brought up at the very start of the podcast. It turns out that her subconscious really could have been trying to tell her something. How do you distinguish between literature and metaphysics, between a symbol of a thing and the reality of a thing? That's my question. And I don't think it should be omitted from the episode.
I'm not even sure it should be answered on the episode. That's one of those, ultimate questions, man.
I think it's very clear in the context of the story in Barge of the Dead that it is all happening in Torres' subconscious mind. I don't think that...
I didn't get that. I didn't get that.
Well, I don't see how you could explain the ending then if it wasn't in Torres' subconscious mind. Where she sees all her friends on Voyager inside. That had to be inside her own head. Because there's nothing in the Klingon religion about that.
No. There's a subjectivity in religion. Well, let's do a little bit for the viewers, just because I love them.
Listeners,
Lord of heaven and earth,
I don't know.
Keep you forever.
Hey, hold on. I don't know whether I know for sure that we have 0 viewers. Whether we have any listeners or not, that's another question.
I think our highest rated episode has 150 downloads, so at some point we've had 150 people say yes. Trekosophy is something I want to spend the next 2 minutes finding out what the Grey Thor is going on here.
Okay.
In the Barge of the Dead world imagery, early on there was a Klingon dude that went overboard.
Yes, and
because
Pitten's, what a goof.
He was hearing whispers. He was hearing people he knew calling to him, luring him over the edge of the boat. And
there's something worse than death.
Well,
what an idiot.
I was just thinking.
Forget him. Let's move on.
It goes to the whole. There may not be specifically a crew full of humans in the Klingon afterlife, but there is familiar voices that are beckoning you to go over the rails.
No, but to me, honest to goodness, you guys, I'm not going to lie to you. I love the lot of you. I've drank enough whiskey to say I love the lot of you. To me, hell would be listening to an eternity of Richard Dawkins lectures. To me, that's hell. And if somebody subjected me to that, I'd be like, wow, would you please just light me on fire right now? That would be better. Nobody would, because they want to torture me, and they want me to be of sound mind as I listen to the Richard Dawkins lectures. Torture is a subjective thing. How can I best torture you for an eternity? Okay, well, I could light you on fire, but let's face facts, you'd probably become accustomed to it after a week. How could I torture you? And that's the wonderful thing that Dante brings up. There are these people's sins. What's appropriate for it? Here is something that's torturous that is appropriate to their sins.
Absolutely.
And Dante takes us through those stages. And so hell is something that is what? Subjective. How does it literally pan out? I don't know. But the episode takes us through this Dante imagery of a torture that is subject to the subject. And I really found that was appropriate. That is wonderful and appropriate. I mean, kudos to the author of the episode. Don't know who it was. Somebody a lot smarter than I am, I'll tell you that.
Oh, I see. Well, the 2 interesting things to say about hell. The first one is, in my own tradition, the Book of Mormon says that hell is a perfect remembrance of your own wickedness. In other words, you don't have to have external tortures, fire and all that stuff. All you have to do is have someone know the absolute truth about themselves. And hell would be the precise technical term for the actual consequence of that by itself for someone who, actually is a bad person. Because, they can hide that from themselves as long as they're here. 'But after death, you can no longer do that. I also think C.S. Lewis gives a very impressively intellectually deep telling or recounting of what hell is like in The Great Divorce. And in The Great Divorce, all you have to do to build a hell is take all the people who reject what is right, love, truth, and goodness, all the people who reject all of that, and put them in the same common space, communal space together. And that's all you have to do. You don't even have to guard the place. They don't want to leave. They want to keep you out is all they want to do. And you don't have to do anything to them. I mean, they're terrible people. They do it to themselves. Because, and another thing about Lewis says on hell, which is really interesting, is, well, imagine you have somebody who their sin is being, their sin is anger. And they can be very difficult to live with now. But imagine their sin getting worse and worse for 1,000,000 years. We can't get all that bad in just 60 to 90 years. But imagine a human developing for 1,000,000 years. It can become absolute hell. So you see what I'm saying? So
I do. I work in a call center.
Yeah. So there are alternative notions of hell that I think actually might be a little bit more scary than Dante and his medieval torture chamber.
No way, Jose.
Well, anyway, that's the two sides on hell. Another thing Lewis says, which I think might be brought up because of what you said earlier about following rules, Brandon. You know what the screw tape letters said about that?
Well, my goodness, I haven't read the screw tape letters. I would venture a guess it's 9 years. And do you know what? They did nothing for me at the time.
Well, they deal. There's one of the screw tape letters that deals specifically with this dichotomy of the abstract ideals of faith, hope, charity, etc., and the actual getting down to the laborious doing of living the Christian life. And very interesting, deals exactly with what you were talking about earlier. You might think of putting that back on your reading list at some point.
Point of fact, I won't. Point of fact.
Okay. Well,
just
no,
a
but
suggestion.
you don't have to say reading list. You can actually tell me what you want me to take away from it, and I'll listen submissively.
Well, I don't know if going further on that topic would be a very good idea right here.
especially since we're getting close to the end here.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then, we can't end on
that,
read a book note. Yeah, like you've got to go beyond that.
Then let's talk about how Torres' journey ended and how
let's do that.
The interesting thing about Klingon honor system, Klingon's religion, whatever you want to call it, is that redemption is a lot harder to get in the Klingon model than in any of the human models, but that redemption actually sticks a lot better once you got it.
Well, that's true. As a matter of fact, most humans that I've spoken with, which would be all of the people that I've spoken with, except for maybe God, if in fact I've ever spoken with them, don't actually live up to their religious ideals. But that includes the atheists. I think Shoot, I forgot my point. It left me. I had
Atheists
something
don't live
wonderful.
up to their anti-religious ideals?
Well, they don't know, but that's what derailed me. What was my point prior to that?
You said
Redemption.
Religious people don't live up to their
Oh,
ideals.
yes,
Getting redemption
yes.
to stick.
Redemption. It's so hard. The whole concept of self-sacrifice. Okay, now all of a sudden B'Elanna is self-sacrificial. I want to sacrifice my own well-being for my mother's. I want her to get this. Redemption is possible, and B'Elanna takes this supreme act of self-sacrifice, whereby, okay, this person is suffering because of my actions. I want to take her place. And this is wonderful. Will she continue on living in this moment of self-sacrifice? To me, that's Christianity. Christianity's repetition of that decision.
Well, that was
what Go ahead.
That was the other interesting thing about. I mean, self-sacrifice. You don't get much more honorable than that. And what does her mom tell her? She says, "Well, congratulations, you've just taken the first step in a very long journey."
Yes, exactly. You've taken the first step. Will you continue on repeating this step? Her mother thinks not. It's like, please permit me to go into the afterlife with what little honor I have left. I believe was the quotation from her mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like
or just
that.
Don't
yeah.
dishonor. Don't spread around any more dishonor. Something like that. Yeah.
The funny, it was. Let me. With what little honor I have left, which is a funny statement because she's on the way to Grethor, which is the destination for Klingons who have no honor.
I know, but B'Elanna's mother had so much honor, so many works. It's like... Here, I'll return to it simply because Revelation has dictated so much of my thoughts over the last 2-3 months. The concept of what? Hell? Fire? Greythor? Worms eating me out very quickly? The concept of 666. A very frightening number. Maximal effort without God. B'Elanna's mother. Maximal effort. So overbearing. When B'Elanna finally took upon herself the concept of actually doing something according to her heart, she could do it. B'Elanna was a very strong, powerful woman. She could do it. Maximal effort without God. Maximal rules, maximal imposition, maximal overbearingness. It didn't work. On its own, it just didn't work. With that, without the actual divine spark, that part in all of us, is not enough on its own. Rules on its own is not enough. Context, culture, upbringing, all of that on its own is just not enough. I apologize if I'm ranting, I really do. I found this episode so wonderful, I get lost into it. I get rambling so quickly and so easily.
As far as rants go, it's a good one.
It's a terrible one. But I acknowledge that it's terrible. And insofar as I acknowledge that it's terrible, that's what makes it wonderful.
Yes, and you're wonderful too, Kirby. And
no,
so is
I'm not.
Trekosophy.
I'm not wonderful. Trekosophy's not wonderful. I'll leave you with that.
I think that Brandon is not so much bad as inebriated.
Exactly. So I think it's probably time to call it an evening. What do you folks think?
Yeah, probably.
Let's do it. Good heavens. Get rid of Kirby. No, you guys should just get rid of Kirby and keep going for the evening.
No.
I'd be in favor of getting rid of Kirby and keeping going for the evening.
You were like on the verge of this like alcohol fueled Zen enlightenment speaking in cones thing, man. It was like there's no following that up with anything.
Yeah, it kind of got lost there at the end. It stopped making sense.
But there's like a no, that's the thing. It's like it wasn't making sense, but you could tell there was some kind of sense behind it. It was like it was a Zen thing, man.
It was like the Zen. It was like the Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I really needed that boost to my self-confidence.
And on that note, Bill, why don't you take us out?
All right, folks, that's all the time we have this evening. And it turns out none of us remembered to bring a coin to tip the ferryman. And like Spock found out when he went back in time to San Francisco, it's exact change only. So boat's got to turn around and take us back to the land of the living. There's no rest and no afterlife for us, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks for listening. Make sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, email us your questions, comments, concerns, complaints at trekosophy@gmail.com. Check us out on iTunes, leave us a review, and thank you very much, and see you next time.
And